Welcome to the Black Writers Studio, a podcast presented by the Hurston Wright Foundation and hosted by Dr. Khadijah Ali Coleman. The Black Writers Studio is dedicated to showcasing Black writers who are transforming the world today with their literary pen and creating a legacy for the culture. Dara T. Mathis is a nonfiction writer and journalist whose work examines parenthood, identity, and linkages to Black memory. Dara is a recipient of the $100,000 2024 American Mosaic Journalism Prize, and she is a 2024 McDowell Fellow. Dara Mathis is a former staff writer at Romper, and her writing has appeared in medium ZORA, The New York Times, The Atlantic, The Week, Blackbird, and other outlets. She has also received support from the Lighthouse Writers Book Project, the Kenyon Review Writers Workshop, and the Sewanee Writers Conference. So I am just so appreciative of having you here today because you are out in this world trying to win up all the awards, trying to get trying to win everything. So for our listeners who don't know and may not be familiar with you just yet, Dara T. Mathis is the recent winner of the 2024 American Mosaic Journalism Prize, which is a $100,000 prize. And in addition, you are a 2024 McDowell Fellow. And so I pride myself on trying to let folks see the diversity when we talk about writers, that everyone is not trying to write a book of fiction or a book of nonfiction. You know, I've had on the show playwrights, scholars, and you are, I would say, probably my most prolific journalist to date. You have had writings in the New York Times, the Atlantic, ZORA on Medium. And yet you were running a GoFundMe campaign just 2 years ago to raise money to attend a writing workshop. So I am really curious about that part. You are a sister of my own heart because I myself was a freelance writer for some time as well, which was one of 50 million jobs that I had. And I know from reading that you really transitioned into writing after working in insurance. So can you tell me a little bit about that genesis, that start of you, this writing, this freelance career that has led us to where we are now?
Well, insurance was the detour. Long story short, I graduated in the middle of the recession, and it was a very catch as catch can kind of employment situation. And
So we're
so,
talking about 2008, the
yes,
bubble. Okay, okay.
yes, like the meat of it. And so that's when I graduated from grad school, and I was just looking for a job. I needed
Mhm.
something. And I had 2 degrees in English. I have a master's degree in English. And
Mm.
so I wound up editing and writing for an insurance company. And so I tell people that I worked in insurance because it's the absolute truth, but I was doing something adjacent to writing and editing within insurance because that's
Okay.
what they tell you when you get an English major is
Right.
that the skills are broadly applicable to very many types of industry.
You sound like a catalog, right?
Oh yeah, that's what they tell you when you meet the guidance counselor. And
Right.
so that I found the job that I could in the situation that I did. But my heart has always been in writing and creative writing. And I wanted, at the time, I was living in Atlanta, I wanted to find a staff writing position somewhere, anywhere. But we were in the middle of a recession, and people who had staff writing jobs were not leaving those jobs if they could take it. I mean, if they could help it.
Mhm.
And so it took me a while. Like I just needed to find a way in, and I couldn't. And the only way that I did was by blogging. And blogging was really taking off at that point.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there are a number of writers who I've been following since like the mid aughts. Just to name a few, I for example, Damon Young,
Mm-hmm.
Demetria L. Lucas, I think Angela Nissel had a blog, I think. I know she was writing back then. She had a book out back then. But just I was following a lot of Black writers who were bloggers, and I kind of saw their trajectory that they were able to gain a toehold or a foothold in media and sort of work their way in there. And so that was my blueprint. Unfortunately, I got in on the tail end of blogging. And so by the time I really decided I was going to do it, it was kind of waning anyway. It was waning anyway. But I was doing it long enough, maybe 2 years or so, enough to catch the attention of editors. And so that's when I started getting commissioned to write op-eds or book reviews, and that's how I started working in journalism. It was really blogging and writing essays, and
It,
people
I,
would
I think I remember reading one of your interviews where you talked about that was when you started to kind of learn how to tailor your pitch.
yeah,
And so you were blogging, but as you were making these pitches for op-eds, you were learning the business, so to speak.
yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that. What that entailed. When we say tailoring your pitch.
I didn't know how to pitch.
Mm,
I didn't even know what pitching was really. I had no idea about how to approach editors, what a masthead was, how to look up people on the masthead. And
mm,
by that time on the internet, people were sort of starting to hide their email addresses anyway. And so the real way that you would find out who was on a masthead was either they reached out to you or you knew someone who knew them. But by tailoring my pitches, I basically learned how to craft a snapshot of an article that I wanted to write in an email, maybe 3 paragraphs at most, and to make it sing,
mhm.
to be succinct, and to kind of do a little bit of footwork as far as what the article, either pre-reporting or kind of figuring out what the meat or the nut graph of the article was going to be, so that I could communicate that, and an editor could decide whether or not they wanted to have me write that article for them.
That's fantastic. I know that what you immediately started writing about were um, you were addressing a lot of things that were relevant to the Black community in particular. And if please correct me if I'm wrong, but when I think of this recent award that made headlines, that was really breaking headlines, because if I'm correct, this was one of the largest awards given to a journalist.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes, it is.
So tell me about the pieces that were considered when when I don't know the process for winning this award, if it's something you apply to, if they're familiar with your work and you're nominated. But I know that you've had some pretty substantial pieces and focus over the past few years, particularly since COVID.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about these pieces and how it led to being in the view of those that were awarded you.
Sure. Well, I can say that I've been freelancing for about 10 years. Like my oldest daughter is 12. And so I've been freelancing probably around the time when she was born, because that's when I realized like it was go time. Like there was there was never going to be another time when I had plentiful time. And so now it was now or never. And so for the past 10 years, I got my start writing about parenthood, about motherhood, because that was the most tactile experience and most overwhelming and immersive experience right in front of me. And I was really writing my way through a lot, whether it was the trauma of childbirth, my particular one, not childbirth writ large, but the
Mhm.
trauma of going through childbirth for me, and then realizing how common my experience was. And so that, and I've read that experience happened to a number of Black women, that you go through an experience, especially as a mother, and then you realize that so many other Black women in particular are going through that experience, and it kind of charges you and galvanizes you in a specific way. And so a lot of the pieces that I was writing up until about 5 years ago were geared toward motherhood, parenthood, lifestyle. I was a staff writer at Romper, which is a parenting magazine, for a very short period of time before I got laid off. But that was in 2019. And so a lot of the pieces that people will find around 2019 and 2020, I was writing about parenthood. I wrote about the decisions couples make for someone to get a vasectomy. I wrote pieces about teachers during COVID,
Mm,
who were parents during COVID as well. So I wrote a number of parent-focused pieces during COVID about COVID.
mhm,
Um, and I think within the last couple of years, because I have been examining other experiences that I've gone through, I published a piece, and it wasn't journalistic, but it was about my hearing loss. I'm hard of hearing,
mm,
and so I wrote an essay about that, and that was published in a literary journal. And so around like 2021 or so, 2022, I started to publish more literary pieces. And so I also wrote a piece about finding where home is.
mhm,
And that was published in the Blood Orange Review. It won their nonfiction contest.
mhm.
I
You
think
did
in
an excellent piece about the church too. Folks
Yeah.
leaving the church during COVID.
Yes, I think that one was in the Atlantic, probably
Mhm,
around like 2020 or 2021 as
mhm,
well. So for the past couple of years, I've written less parenting focused pieces, but my heart is still with the experiences of Black folks. And so
mhm,
that's where a lot of my writing comes out of. If I can, if I can sink my teeth into something that'll allow me to do a little research, allow me to interview folks and talk to them about their stories, and allow me to put a historical framework and tie it to what people are experiencing today, like that's my dream piece. Like so
It,
any of the pieces I've done for the Times of the Atlantic that really let me get in my bag and like do some like really nerdy research about history, like I love those.
well, that is a great transition because you are working on a book now, right?
Yes, yes, I am working on a book about, well, it's based on the piece that I wrote for the Atlantic about my growing up experience in the Shrine of the Black Madonna, and the communes that they ran for a number of years.
Yes, yes, yes.
And that was the piece that caught the attention of the judges for the American Mosaic Prize. And I just realized I didn't say exactly how that happened, but the Mosaic Prize, the American Mosaic Journalism Prize, is something that the Heising Simons Foundation gives to two journalists a year, and you can't apply for it. You don't even know you're up in contention for it. They ask journalists around the country to kind of say, hey, who do you know who's a freelancer, whose work you like, submit nominations. And so they get about 150 or so nominations, I believe. And they whittle that down to 10. And then out of 10 nominations, the judging panel that changes every year whittles it down to two. And so this year I was one of the two picked, and my co-winner was Tamir Khalifa, who is a brilliant photojournalist who was documenting the Uvalde massacre.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Congratulations again. That's so wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about this piece? And if you said it was a commune. Can you tell us a little bit about this and what you wrote about, and what part of the piece you've written will expand in your book, how it will expand in your book?
Sure. Um, well, to make a long article short, I the article is about how my parents joined the Shrine of the Black Madonna, which is a Black nationalist church that was started in Detroit around the civil rights movement, heading into the Black Power movement. And the Shrine was a serious radical powerhouse, especially during the 68 rebellion in Detroit. And its founder, Albert Clegg, is also a huge figure in Detroit as an activist and a minister, and one of Black Detroit's one of the pillars of Black Detroit, at least in that era. But my parents joined when they were young, and then they split up, and so the article is kind of me retracing how they joined, and how they came to be members of a commune that the church started, and what it meant that that commune was working toward Black liberation, and how it fares today, basically.
Fantastic. Are you simply working on a book, or is one of the requirements of the prize to result in a book, or is that based on your own choice, or is the book deal separate from you winning the prize?
The prize is unrestricted, which essentially means that they give me the award and I am free to do with it as I see fit. And so it doesn't come with an imperative to publish anything. And it's either to support my work monetarily, like just allow me to do reporting, or it's to allow me to live and breathe,
Mhm.
um, without having to pitch for my life,
Right, right, right.
without having to pitch my life.
Right. And because you have, you're a mom, like you said, and your oldest is 12, but you have a toddler as well. And so you're balancing, you're in the thick of it. A 12 and a 5-year-old is no joke.
There
So,
are three of them. I have a
oh,
12-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 5-year-old.
I had no idea. So
Yes.
you are in the thick of it,
Yes.
and you are writing a book,
Yes.
and you have an upcoming residency.
Yes.
So tell us how you manage all of this. You balance it, we so many of our heroines, our iconic writers, Toni Morrison, all of them talk at length about Lucille Clifton. I think she was asked why a lot of her poems are so short, and she said, she has all those kids.
That I remember that.
So how has motherhood impacted um this writerly journey?
I would say that I would not be able to do any of this without my husband. I have a wonderful supportive partner, and I also have a wonderful supportive mother, and my father and my extended family are extremely supportive and so encouraging, and they've just been cheering me on forever, and not just cheering me, but in very real terms, the only way that I am able to go on a 2-week residency is because my mother is coming up to help, and I wouldn't be able to do it otherwise. And my husband is here with it. He's going to be here with the kids, and my mother is going to be here with the kids, and so I wouldn't be able to reach for the things that I'm reaching for without that community and communal support, which is so resonant to me because the book that I am writing examines the bonds within a commune, a Black commune, bonds that are still very strong and existent today. And so part of part of me writing that book is to explore the ways that communalism still shows up in my life today, even though I no longer live on a commune.
That's really beautiful and very well said because when we often hear the word commune, we usually, if it's outside of whiteness and this idea of a hippie commune, we
Mhm.
also think of cult,
Mhm.
or something that we lose sight of the word community, which is closely associated. So bringing that back, I appreciate that you did that. But I do have a question for you as a journalist. I I don't get a chance to talk to journalists a lot, and I want to know, recently, I think yesterday, the House um, voted, 81 members voted to ban TikTok before it moves to the Senate. I want your thoughts on, as you are a journalist, as you're seeing more and more news outlets shutter, especially when we talk about print journalism. What does that mean for you as a freelance writer? I know you said that you're moving more into literary writing, more creative nonfiction and things like that, but what does that mean for you and for us as we think of the ways that news is shared, and publications are shuttering?
I think um at
And
the
and
forefront.
I do want to put out,
Yeah.
because I led with TikTok and then I started talking about news, but I did want to give some context because the reality is that a lot of people even begin to understand what's happening in the world first through social media, through places like TikTok. Then they may say, "Oh, let me go and read more about this." So I
Mhm.
do recognize that oftentimes these two things are conflated when we talk about news outlets and social media. So I did want say face to give context to that.
So that's no problem at all. I did want to say, like, when I think about journalists and some of the precarious situations that they're in today, like my mind immediately goes toward the war in Gaza and how killing and killing and how do you get the news if the journalists are not able to do their work safely? How do you get the news if the journalists are afraid? Like, how do you get the news if journalists are not safe? Um, so that that's on the forefront of my mind, but also, here in the States, the job security for journalists is it's a mirage. Um, and as a freelance writer, I've never had that. So, and I've never worked in a newsroom before. I've only done journalism freelance. And so to see outlets shutter and to see journalists being laid off, and thrust into a situation of precarity, it's disheartening for me because I hoped to be on staff somewhere at some point. For a long time, that's what I was working toward. And that's kind of, that was kind of the blueprint, right? Like that you amassed enough clips and that you could then take those clips and say, hey, I've shown that I can do the work and maybe you can hire me, but like the jobs are not there. And so I guess I'm having to adjust my own perception of the job field, but also my perception of what it is that I want to do with my talent and my interests. Like I haven't found a pretty shiny solution to tie up with a bow at all, honestly. I'm working on this book and I'm writing what pieces I'm able to land. And for the foreseeable future, until I go work in somebody's office, I am freelance.
That is so chilling almost, because I think of you, you're an artist, you're a journalist, and it just immediately lends me to also think of academia, where now, more than 80% of professors are adjuncts. And so it's increasingly these roles in our society that have always been the truth tellers, the artists, the journalists, the teachers, are now having to supplement their pay. If they want to engage, it has to be one out of many jobs or many roles that they take. And I think that's becoming more and more normative. So to sh you shining light on that and saying, even after winning this incredible prize and having these opportunities that you've had, that it still has not lent any security to you. And you may just very well be working in someone's office after all of this, um, is very stunning. And I think it's a testament to today's times and where we are. And what'd you say?
Freelancers don't have 401ks.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's
exactly.
that's been my reality for the past 10 years or so. And
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
need something.
yeah. And and not to dismiss also where you bring into the conversation what's happening in Gaza and in places, and here as well, but all over the world, but particularly in Gaza right now, where journalists are really risking their lives to be able to inform us and to let us know what's happening. And so now it's not only an issue of low pay or no pay, it's an issue of will I live to tell this story? Um, and so on that note, I ask for you to share with readers and listeners, excuse me, with our listening audience where they can connect with you, where you would like them to connect with you. Because if you're anything like me, sometimes you get things unsolicited, like people showing up in spaces like, I did not, why are you here? Where would you like people to meet you and to connect with you and to follow your work?
Well, I guess the first place that they can go is my website, and it's my name, Dara, Darat,
Mhm.
Mathis.com. And the other place is Twitter, unfortunately. I still call it Twitter.
That's right.
And
That's right.
Twitter and Instagram and reluctantly Threads. And they can find me at my handle at Truly Tafakari, and Tafakari is Tafakari.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for spending time with me today in the Black Writers Studio. I am just amazingly, I'm so happy for you. I didn't know you before this interview. We have been social media connections for a while, but I just, when I read the news, my heart just became so glad for you. And I just hope that this is the beginning of many awards that you receive. Your work is beautiful. I love that you continue to center Black people in your work and our experiences and the diversity of our experiences, continuing to show that we are not a monolith. And I just wish you continued success. So thank you for joining me today and having this conversation.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me, Khadijah. I really appreciate it.
Fantastic.